Key drivers of displacement. Understanding the roots of forced displacement. Why people are forced to flee. Forced displacement happens when people are left with no choice but to abandon their homes due to threats that jeopardize their lives, safety, or dignity. These threats take many forms, ranging from war and persecution to environmental collapse and systemic human rights abuses. What unites all cases of forced displacement is the element of urgency. People flee not in pursuit of opportunity, but to escape danger, deprivation, or death. One of the most persistent and devastating causes is armed conflict. Civil wars, military invasions, and internal unrest can quickly turn communities into war zones. People are driven from their homes by bombing campaigns, military attacks, and the total breakdown of security and services. The civil war in Syria stands as one of the clearest examples, having forced over half the country's population into exile or internal displacement. When conflict erupts, normal life shatters almost instantly.
Armed conflict and political repression is one of the key drivers of displacement. One of the most agonizing realities of our day is forced displacement, which we are starting to examine in depth and with urgency today. Around the world, millions of people are being driven from their homes, not by choice, but by threat to their lives, their safety, and their dignity. These are not isolated stories. They are global in scale, devastating in impact, and deeply human at their core. While the causes of displacement are many, from natural disasters to climate change, armed conflict and political repression remain the most visible and destructive forces. When bullets fly, when bombs fall, and when governments use fear to silence their people, civilians pay the price. Families are torn apart. Homes are reduced to rubble. Livelihoods vanish overnight. Armed conflict does not just destroy infrastructure. It destroys hope. It turns streets into war zones, neighbors into enemies, and nations into battlegrounds. And when political repression is layered on top of that, when states imprison, torture, and disappear those who dissent, it becomes clear why people are forced to flee. They are not migrating for opportunity. They are running for survival. Displacement caused by conflict is uniquely traumatic. People are often forced to flee with no warning, carrying nothing but what they can hold in their hands. They leave behind everything: homes, communities, schools, and histories. And too often, they do not know when or if they will ever return. This is not just a humanitarian crisis, it is a crisis of justice. Because those who flee are not simply victims of violence, they are victims of failed politics, failed leadership, and failed protection. Let us now look at how this reality unfolds in the lives of real people across real countries. These stories are not headlines. They are lived experiences of communities uprooted by war and oppression. Take Venezuela, where economic collapse has been accelerated by political repression. Under Nicolas Maduro's regime, dissent is criminalized, freedom is suppressed, and the economy has imploded. Hyperinflation, food shortages, and state-sponsored violence have left millions with no option but to flee. More than 7 million Venezuelans have left the country, not because of a natural disaster or war, but because their own government has failed them and punished them for speaking out. In Myanmar, we see how political persecution and ethnic cleansing can collide with catastrophic consequences. The Rohingya Muslim minority has faced decades of discrimination, stripped of citizenship and basic rights. In 2017, the situation exploded into full-scale violence. Entire villages were burnt, women were raped, and children were murdered. Over 700,000 Rohingya fled to Bangladesh, where they now live in crowded refugee camps, still stateless, still voiceless. Myanmar is a powerful reminder that when persecution is backed by military force, entire populations can be erased from their homelands. In Haiti, the driver of displacement is not a conventional war, but something just as terrifying: total state collapse. Gangs now rule large swaths of the capital, Port-au-Prince, with unchecked violence. The state offers no protection, no justice, no basic services. More than 1 million Haitians are now displaced within their own country, trapped in limbo by lawlessness and fear. Haiti shows us that when a state fails entirely, non-state actors can bring just as much devastation as any army. Now let us turn to Palestine, where displacement is not a one-time crisis, but a generational trauma. Since the mid-20th century, millions of Palestinians have been uprooted by war, occupation, and political stalemate. From the 1948 Nakba to present-day Gaza, Palestinians have lived under siege, in exile, and in overcrowded refugee camps from Lebanon to Syria to the West Bank. Ongoing military occupation, repeated bombings, and the absence of a political resolution have created a crisis that spans decades and borders. Palestinian displacement is not just about the past. It is a continuing consequence of a conflict that remains unresolved. The dream of return still burns in the hearts of millions, but reality offers few paths home. Syria presents perhaps the most haunting modern example of how civil war can annihilate an entire society. What began as a peaceful uprising in 2011 spiraled into one of the most destructive conflicts of the 21st century. The government bombed its own people. Extremist groups took hold. Foreign powers fought by proxy. The result? Over 13 million Syrians displaced. Cities like Aleppo and Homs turned to rubble. Civilians deliberately targeted. Refugees scattered from Lebanon to Europe, with no clear hope of return. Syria is not just a war zone. It's a cautionary tale of what happens when the world looks away. In Ukraine, displacement happened with terrifying speed. When Russia invaded in 2022, over 14 million people fled their homes within weeks. This was Europe's fastest and largest mass movement of people since World War II. Some found shelter in Poland, Germany, and Romania. Others remained displaced within Ukraine's shattered cities. While international aid was swift, the long road to rebuilding and return remains uncertain. The Ukrainian crisis underscores how modern warfare can displace millions in an instant, and how quickly the world must respond. And then there is Sudan, a nation marked by a cruel cycle of conflict and redisplacement. In April 2025, the Rapid Support Forces attacked the Zamzam displacement camp in Darfur, killing over 300 people, most of them already displaced from earlier conflicts. Nearly 400,000 more fled in the aftermath. This was not a battlefield. It was a supposed sanctuary, yet it became a massacre site. The broader civil war in Sudan has shattered humanitarian access and rendered millions homeless. Sudan shows us the devastating reality that displacement is not always a one-time event. It can happen again and again and again. Each of these cases, though rooted in different histories and geographies, reveals the same painful truth. Where conflict rages and repression rules, people are forced to flee. They do not want to leave. They are not seeking better lives. They are seeking to stay alive.